November 24, 1971. Portland International Airport was flooded with travelers heading home for the Thanksgiving holiday. The terminal was a blur of heavy coats, luggage, and families reuniting. Through the holiday chaos walked a man in his mid-40s. He wore a crisp dark suit, black tie, and dark sunglasses, carrying a briefcase. He stepped up to the Northwest Orient counter, paid cash, and purchased a one-way ticket for Flight 305 to Seattle. The name he gave the agent was Dan Cooper. He looked like any other traveling businessman commuting ahead of the long weekend. He boarded the aircraft, took a seat in the back row, and lit a cigarette, entirely blending in to mask the historic crime he was about to initiate. Shortly after takeoff, the quiet hum of the cabin was interrupted when Cooper gestured to a passing flight attendant and slipped her a folded piece of paper. Assuming it was just a flirtatious passenger giving her his phone number, she dropped it in her purse. But Cooper leaned in and whispered that she needed to look at it. The note contained a single, terrifying piece of information. He had a bomb. To prove it, he cracked open his briefcase. Inside, she saw a cluster of red cylinders, a heavy battery, and a mess of wires. Without raising his voice, he laid out exactly what he wanted: $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 civilian parachutes, and a refueling truck standing by on the runway in Seattle. He didn't shout, and he didn't draw a weapon. By remaining perfectly composed, he effectively took control of a commercial airliner and 36 passengers, without anyone else on board even realizing a hostage situation was taking place. Flight 305 touched down in Seattle just under 2 hours later. Local police and FBI agents had already secured the perimeter of the runway, tracking the aircraft as it taxied to an isolated stretch of tarmac. The authorities delivered heavy canvas bags packed with $10,020 bills and the 4 requested parachutes. In return, Cooper allowed all 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants to walk off the plane unharmed. The aircraft was fully surrounded. The hostages were safe. To the armed agents waiting in the rain, the logical next step was for the lone man inside to walk down the stairs and surrender. But Cooper had no intention of giving up. He allowed the ground crew to refuel the tanks, using the FBI's own containment strategy to fully stock the aircraft for a secondary, much darker flight. He ordered the remaining flight crew to take off again, pointing the nose south directly into a massive, freezing Pacific Northwest thunderstorm. He issued strict instructions: keep the cabin unpressurized, deploy the landing gear, and lower altitude strictly to 10,000 feet. He also mandated a speed of 200 miles per hour, dangerously close to stalling. These parameters were mathematically required to survive the jump. With the crew locked in the cockpit, Cooper stood alone in the dark passenger cabin. He forced open the rear aft door, and the cabin was instantly swallowed by deafening engine noise and sub-zero winds. He secured a military-grade parachute, tied the cash to his waist, and walked down the steel steps. Somewhere over the dense, cold, mountainous terrain of Washington state, the man known as D.B. Cooper stepped off the stairs and into the void. The pilot felt a sudden upward pitch in the tail of the aircraft, leaving the terrified flight crew completely alone in the sky. He leveraged the blackness of the night, the sheer drop in altitude, and the chaos of the freezing storm to entirely erase his exit path, treating the deadly environmental elements as his ultimate cover. By morning, the FBI had launched one of the most extensive search operations in the history of American law enforcement. Thousands of federal agents, local deputies, and military helicopters were dispatched to comb the assumed drop zone. They searched dense pine forests line by line, dragged freezing lakes, and hiked through treacherous ravines along the exact flight path between Seattle and Reno. Weeks turned into months. The search yielded absolutely nothing. They couldn't find a ripped parachute cord, a single bill of the ransom, or a body. Despite blanketing the Pacific Northwest with the full operational might of the U.S. government, there was not a single shred of physical proof indicating where he landed, or if he even survived the fall. The trail remained completely dead until February 1980, when a young boy was digging a fire pit on a sandy beach along the Columbia River. Buried just below the surface of the mud, he found 3 bundles of rubber-banded, heavily deteriorated $20 bills. When forensic technicians checked the serial numbers against their logs, they matched perfectly. It was a $5,800 fragment of Cooper's payout, providing the first absolute proof of the stolen money. But rather than solving the case, the money complicated it. Found miles away from his projected drop zone, it raised impossible questions about whether the cash had washed ashore from a corpse or if a living Cooper had intentionally buried it there to mislead the authorities. Over the next 4 decades, investigators exhausted thousands of leads. Finally, in July 2016, the FBI officially and permanently closed the unsolved case. Dan Cooper packed $200,000 into a bag, stepped into the violent winds of a midnight storm, and simply ceased to exist, securing his place as the ultimate phantom of American aviation.